Ryan, buddy,
I haven't seen you in like forever, man.
were you there? You would have been there July 1st for at the Saddle Dome for free agency.
Yes.
Yes, so that would have been the last time I saw you. I was also thinking, I mean, I have known you for the better part of a decade at this point, just through seeing each other at sort of various media availabilities and what have you. We have never actually professionally done anything together.
No, I'm working through my bingo card.
Yeah, it's it's crazy. Like, I feel like I've done radio with just about everybody. Haven't done it with you. Obviously, you know, you do a ton of stuff here with the Nation Network.
I go where I'm told to go.
Yes,
I go where I'm told to go.
Where you're told to go. And I host a podcast here, live from the 55, our CFL podcast. Please like and subscribe and check it out. But yeah, we've never actually done anything like that, so it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. You I think on Friday before the show with Julian, you're like, "Hey, want to come in on Monday?" I'm like, "Yeah." Because we again, we hardly see each other and have a chance to really catch up like this, and B,
I mean, until like a month from now, at which point
we're gonna be
way too much of each other.
We're gonna be sick of each other by the outdoor game.
Yeah, you sit pretty close to where the tea is located in the Saddle Dome press box. And
yeah,
they drink a lot of tea.
They put the traditional media people. It's inside baseball here. They put the traditional media people on the one side of the press box, and then the other side, there's me, there's Salim Balji, and a couple other people who sit down towards the pro scouts on the other side. Which the upside means we're close to the pro scouts. We get to make friends, and we're also really close to the tea and coffee.
Yeah, and popcorn and various selections of Coca-Cola products, I believe, at the Saddle Dome, right?
Oh yeah,
McManus Pepsi products, Coca-Cola at the Saddle Dome. But yeah, we stop in, we say hi. You always, I don't know, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I will say, Salim Valji, he might be coming in today. I'd also invited him over the weekend, but his phone isn't working, and he was
still out of town.
He was in Vancouver for the weekend, visiting, I believe, his mother. And when we talked last night, he was like, "Well, my flight gets in at 12:15," and I was like, "All right, well, don't worry about it, man. Like, I got Pike. Like, we're getting." He was like, "I'm gonna try, man. It's just I'm gonna try." And I was like, "Salim, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you don't have to come."
And so, I know our reputations. We can fill the time.
Yeah, we can fill the time. You're a talker. But yeah, so I have no idea if Salim is coming in or not. I don't think he is, except that I know his phone's not working. So he couldn't, his flight was landing at 12:15. He couldn't reach out and tell me if he wanted to, that he wasn't coming in. So Salim, if you're listening, you know, we love you. It's okay if you don't come in. He's just written me. His flight was delayed, so he's got to figure it out. So we're good. No Salim Valji, just me.
This is why I'm glad we opened with saying nice things about Salim. So, I mean, karmically, I think we're covered.
Always. I will likely see him for our terrible slow pitch team. It's our last game of the season tonight. Pike, I got to ask. Not a lot of Flames news this summer.
On Friday's show, you and Julian talked about just it's been. We always joke with this. Like, my family members are always like, "Is it going to be another busy summer?" And my answer was, maybe. It depends, because we had that busy stretch. I think I wrote it out from the last game of the season on April 12th. I think we had something like 6 or 7 major press conferences. And then there was a 3-day period in Nashville where we basically saw poor Craig Conroy every day for a fairly significant press conference for media availability. And then come home, July 1st happens, and then not much happens, and then basically nothing. There's been, since July 1st, I think the Wranglers have announced the hiring of Trent Cole as their new head coach, and Samuel Honzek signed his entry-level deal. That's it.
Yeah, I think so, right?
There's been 2 things in the better part of 2.5 months.
Yeah, no, this morning, Wes Gilbertson covered it for us at Post Media, but I do know Andrew Mangiapane was hosting the Italian hockey.
I think it's the Italian Open.
The Italian Open?
Yeah.
So I know that there was a media availability there. I think that the main news, as you would expect, there was not a ton from like 3 weeks before training camp opens with one of your forwards, but Andrew Mangiapane did say that his shoulder is basically all healed and he is 100% ready to go. I didn't see anything else particularly newsworthy come out of that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what you expect from that kind of thing. I mean, it's one of, we could fill a whole hour talking about the charitable stuff that Flames players and Flames related entities do, because that's what you do here. That's the standard they've set. And Mangiapane showing up at a charity event, not unexpected. Mangiapane talking about him feeling better, not unexpected. I think based on the timeline of when he had the surgery, I think he had it, right after the season, which would have been mid to late April is probably when he went under the knife. So I think timeline wise, this is about how you'd expect, a non-insanely intricate surgery to go for recovery. So, I mean, good for him.
And if I may just interrupt very quickly, just because you did mention it, I think that if we're going to talk about one of these charity golf tournaments, it is worth noting that proceeds were going to the Renfrew Educational Services. So good on him. We're all very happy and supportive of that. But I don't know, like, what else were we expecting from Andrew Mangiapane at this point? He wasn't going to comment on trades or free agency. So cool, he's healthy. That's what we need to know. And I think Andrew Mangiapane is a guy. He is one of the players who, whenever I talk to people, and I'll just ask you directly, when I ask people like, oh, what are your expectations for the Flames? Andrew Mangiapane is one who, if he gets back to the level that we saw from 2 seasons ago, you have hope. If he doesn't, you're probably not that optimistic. He's sort of one of those, that group of 5 or 6 players who you need that return to the mean.
Yeah, well, that's let's be honest. I've been talking to a lot of people about this over the offseason. The Flames were a team that missed the playoffs by 3 points. They missed the playoffs by 3 points, despite the fact that their penalty kill was, significantly below average. At 5-on-5, they were a decent offensive team. They should have been an exceptional offensive team with the amount of chances they got, but they couldn't bury anything, which speaks to a bunch of different factors we'll get into. Their defense was big whoopsies at bad times. Their goaltending just couldn't make that big save that they needed consistently. And so, it was one of those years where, the analytics community basically goes, oh, they're fighting it. They're doing the right things, but things are going against them every time. And it's like, do
you feel like we do this in Calgary though? Like
every second season?
Well, and dating back to, I moved here in 2011, and sort of my impression of the Flames when I moved here, and I've become smarter and more educated, I hope, about them, but my impression had been that this was a team that had made the playoffs in 2004 and had gone on a Stanley Cup run and had just sort of always said, well, what if a couple things go differently, we can do that again. And potentially, it's every second season they seem to miss the playoffs now or fall short of expectations.
Yeah.
Like it, and I don't actually believe that it's the other way, but it does feel like this is,
well, especially
like we shouldn't. This is, the goal should not be one good season, one bad season.
And especially we'll get into this in future installments in other programs when certain things are on the market. But I've written a lot and researched this, the history of the franchise a lot. Basically from when the Flames started in 72 until when Alco or Cliff Fletcher left and they sort of went through a revolving door of GMs in 92. The Flames were a team that was like, okay, build. And even, there is, Cliff Fletcher developed a reputation. His nickname was Trader Cliff because he had a good team and he was like, I don't want to have a good team. I want to have a great team. So he's constantly trading people. He traded Kent Nilsson coming off an insanely good season because he was injured for the playoffs and went, oh, okay, if we can do this well without him, let's try to replace him with something we can use. And so that turned into, opening up spots for other guys. They traded, very good defensemen. People don't remember this. They traded Paul Reinhart the year before they won the Stanley Cup. The training camp in 88, they traded Paul Reinhart because he was 29 going on 30. And he was, he had a series of back and shoulder injuries in his career. And, they had, a bunch of good defensemen. And Cliff was going, I can't have 9 defensemen. I need to make some room for guys. And there's really no reason to have a guy I think is going to break down. So let's cash out when you have value. So you have to be ballsy to cash out on guys when there's still value. And it got them the Flames to Stanley Cup. They were constantly improving from 1972 until about 1990. And then the economy hit them. The US dollar, versus Canada,
huge
60 cent dollar. There was no salary cap. You're a Canadian team paying your players in American dollars. It hurt. And, the 90s were basically just economic factors, just beating the Flames to death over and over and over again. And I'll give the Flames credit. They did a hell of a job just hanging in there. And then once the salary cap came in 04, I think in a way, kind of the worst thing that could have happened to the Flames was that 04 run. And not, I think it saved them from a business standpoint, but I think from a hockey standpoint, the challenge is like you mentioned, if you think, oh, you just got to get in, maybe you have a chance, then that really just tops you out as a team that can get in and try to make some noise. But you have to have, some, I'm not going to say they don't have backbone, but I think you have to be pretty ballsy and say, this is the plan. This is what we're doing. we're doing this, even when it's something as crazy as trading away really good players like Paul Reinhart right before, coming up. They were the President's Trophy that year, and they traded their best defensive defenseman outside of like Al McInnes because they thought, okay, he's going to fall apart. He's physically going to fall apart. We need to figure out a way to maximize his value. And if you look at the Flames history at the odds after the salary cap came in, it was Darryl Sutter trying to replicate the 04 Magic. And the 04 Magic was, in a system where, officials, we love you, it's a tough job. Nobody called anything. You could basically, if you look at Jerome McGinley's highlight package up until 2004, it's him skating with guys basically water skiing behind him, hooking and holding. And it's Jerome McGinley doing his best to pull like 3 guys behind him. And it's kind of a minor miracle he had the numbers he did when he did. Imagine him in an area where they actually call penalties. But they went from, okay, we had this magic run, instead of going, okay, the Flames had, hot hands for goaltending. Everything worked. Every change Darryl Sutter made in that 02 to 04 period just worked and everyone fit. And then coming out of a lockout, everyone's a year older. Everyone's, hasn't really played for a year. You don't really know how things are going to gel. And he tried to replicate the Flames magic, special sauce for 3, 4, 5 years. And it just didn't work because you can't really do that. It's impossible. And I think to a certain extent, that kind of thing happened after 2015, where I think the Find a Way Flames run, where, they got the best possible opponent for themselves in the first round. And, they were asked, hey, can you beat Vancouver? And they decisively beat Vancouver. It was a series that the Flames.
That series was so much fun.
It was so
even
fun.
as someone who did not grow up here, is not by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I don't call myself a Flames fan, and I was pretty much pinned to the desk at the Calgary Sun at the time.
It was such a fun series.
It was just so much fun. And like, there's nothing quite like when the young up and comers sort of just catch the veteran team that expects to win by surprise. And particularly with the Calgary Vancouver, I loved that series.
But I think from like a macro and a micro standpoint, like, micro, look at how they handled Sam Bennett, where it's like, okay, Sam Bennett came in, he was playing, I believe, primarily on line with it was Backlund and then a rotation of guys. There's, a lot of different rotation on that line. But you put anyone with Michael Backlund, it'll be good. I think Sam Bennett's playing style really lended itself well to playoff hockey, where the rules are a bit relaxed and you can basically, crash the net and not really be worried about getting a penalty unless you like two-hand a guy.
So do you think that's why Sam Bennett was so much better in the playoffs than the regular season? Like,
I think so.
It happened over and over.
I also think, if you're looking at sort of, how do you conceptualize, it's like, what's your job? It's like, well, today, Sam, your job is to go out and you're going to be, I think matchups are really important in the playoffs. You're basically saying the same, 2 lines and 1 defensive pairing. So if you're saying to Sam in the video room, hey, Sam, you're playing against these 6 guys, especially these 2 guys in your wing, and you're playing against these defensemen, these are the battles you need to win. You can really dig in and say, okay, good, I can wrap my head around this. And then, for various reasons, part of it was the coaching turnover. Part of it was, they tried, they said to themselves, is he a winger? Is he a center? They tried him in both. His role kind of got muddy. And then the seasons afterwards, you bring in guys like, Matthew Tkachuk never played center growing up. So they never tried to turn him into a center. They said, Matthew Tkachuk, here's your job. You're going to be, running shotgun with Backlund for a couple years, and then we're going to let you loose. And it worked. Andre Mangiapane comes in and they're like, Andre Mangiapane, you can't play center, so you're just a winger. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges I think Dylan Dubé is experiencing now. And I think he's dealt with it really well so far. What are you? Are you a center? Or are you a winger? Are you trying to do a lot of different things? Because the nuances and the rhythm of the positions are very, very different, especially over the grind of a season. And I think, you can, if you wanted to set up a guy to be a center, good, but you got to commit to it, because if you sort of go back and forth, it leaves the guy sort of wondering, what am I supposed to be doing here?
Yeah. And I mean, my impression of Ryan Huska is he's a guy who understands developing players. Like that does seem to be, he's got the AHL background.
He's got a good resume of getting guys to the NHL.
Yeah. So, I mean, and where do you see, let's bring it forward to this team. It's hard because there's the possibility that we are going to see significant movement between now and the start of the season. I think it's sort of becoming increasingly unlikely, but
I think we're going to see some movement before the end of 2023. I don't know when.
So, okay. But you know what? I'm going to alter my approach here. You know what I'm going to ask? Backlund, Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev, Zadorov, Shillington. When do you think, I mean, I don't think that they're moving Shillington, but when do you think it is most likely that we see movement on one of those guys, either a contract signed or you deal him?
I think they'll get a sense of what's happening with Lindholm pretty early on, though, because
They don't already.
I think a lot of guys, this is from me speaking to absolutely nobody. This is just my outside the fishbowl observation. I think it's been a tough couple of years for a lot of people in and around the team. I mean, you went from a COVID season to a bubble season to a season where you got yelled at all year, but you were winning, to a season where you got yelled at all year, but you were losing. And I think if you have the opportunity, like, let's be honest, the market is what the market is. It's not like teams are magically a lot of extra money.
said he couldn't go into the season with all 7 UFAs.
He got 6.
And like I said to Julian, is that what he meant? Like, am I just an idiot who doesn't understand hockey?
I think
that's what he meant. I think,
come on, I don't want to put words in the general manager's mouth, but my interpretation of those comments was the Flames.
I got to get rid of Toffoli.
The Flames, when they went into the last year of pre-RFA Kachuk and pre-UFA Gaudreau, I think the idea was, okay, well, we'll deal with it in the summer. Let's just focus on the season. We'll deal with it in the summer. And we'll deal with it in the summer is basically punting your problems down the road and not doing the work to really figure out, what are we doing here? What do you want? What do I want? And having that conversation, keep the dialogue open. And it's easy, they've done it a few times, and sometimes it works really well because it allows everyone to sort of clear their head and go into the conversations in the offseason with a clear mind and knowing what they want because they've had time to mull it over themselves. But sometimes, especially if you're a team with 6 significant UFAs, or maybe 7, I think you need to sort of have a sense, especially with with how tumultuous the last couple of seasons were. You probably want to have a sense of, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about this group, about the team, about the direction, about the city? Because if, I firmly believe that the feedback that Don Maloney got in those conversations influenced who they hired as a GM and as a coach. And I think if you didn't have that viewpoint of, man, this has been a tough couple of years, what are we doing here? Let's take a deep breath and figure out where, what the pain points are. I think I think you're basically stumbling around a bit. And so,
okay, so let's start at the end then.
Okay.
If you do not have it, I'm gonna isolate these 3 particular players.
Okay.
Backlund, Lindholm, and Hanifin.
Yeah.
At the trade deadline, if you do not have pen to paper, you have to trade them, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yes, right? Like,
Hannifin's reportedly already told the team respectively, I'm not really feeling it. I'll probably be going elsewhere next year. So they are, I think they're already looking for deals for him. I think for Lindholm and for Backlund, I think for Lindholm, when they get phone calls, they go, okay, thanks, but I mean, we want to keep him, but we'll take that under advisement. They write down a notebook and say, we'll get back to you if we change our minds. And I think with Backlund, I think they're probably listening a bit more intently. But I also think, why they spent the money they did on Michael Backlund when he was a pending UFA? They gave him a bunch of money because their analytics team basically laid out for management, hey guys, here's what you need to do to replace the inputs this guy does. And they went, Michael, here's your contract.
Oh, yeah. To be clear, I love all these guys as players. This is.
But I agree with you. I think from an asset management standpoint, I think you definitely need to get something of value for Hanifin. If you don't have a Lindholm going forward, you need to get something for him.
I think you can get real value for Hanifin, and possibly value that I consider to be a little bit disproportionate to what he actually means to the team.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. I if we consider that by the end of the season, Anderson and Uyghur were the top 2
easily
defensemen, and then
I'd
argue that Tanev was the number 3.
And I don't think people remember how damn good Oliver Shillington was playing with Chris Tanev 2 years ago.
For sure.
And so right there,
Hanifin's a good player. Like, I'm not taking away from him, but I'm saying, like, if hypothetically you're like, okay, you expect Shillington to be back at that level, and you're basically trading your number 4 defenseman. And now the rest of the league may know that too, but just like when his name was on the market, it seemed like the deals that were being thrown around, not even from Calgary, from other markets, we're treating this guy like he's a number 1. And I was like, cool, if you can get that deal, do it.
That's the thing, because I think it's not so much what he is, but what can he be. If you're the GM of New Jersey, Boston, Buffalo, Carolina, wherever, if you're a GM and your pro scouts are saying, hey, if you look at Hanifin, he's played against good opponents and performed well. He can run a power play. He can run a penalty kill. He can play in any game situation. He can play with anybody. He's been used in shutdown situations. He's been used in offensive generating situations. If I bet you pro scouts from 31 teams are telling their GMs, hey, if we can get the price to be palatable, this guy can help us in a lot of different ways. And I think,
but he is not a number one defenseman, I don't think, on a team that you expect to win playoff rounds.
no, I think
what can he be?
It's like the Michael Backlund thing, where it's like, on a team with good enough depth to do some damage in the playoffs, Michael Backlund's probably a third line center. That's pretty good, though. I mean, he finished pretty high up in the Selke Valley last year, being a third line center. And I think
I'm not going to say a single bad word about Michael Backlund, because I think he's great.
He's fantastic,
and he fits into his role perfectly. He's a leader on the team. I think that those comments we heard from Rasmus Anderson last week about Backlund was the captain.
Yeah.
It was a little awkward because he didn't have the C, but he was the captain of the team. I think speaks volumes. Michael Backlund, I won't say a bad thing about, and I'm not saying anything bad about Noah Hanifin. I honestly not.
You know how many guys would kill to be a good second pairing guy in the NHL?
Absolutely. I'm just saying that the way that he was spoken about was almost as if he was a number one guy, and I just don't think he is. And in terms of what he can be, well, he's got 600 NHL games to his name. Yeah. And I don't know how much improvement we typically see NHL players have past when they're at that number. They generally are what they are at 600 games.
But his playing style, it's not, he doesn't play a super physical style, so it's not like his game's going to fall off a cliff, pretty quickly. I mean, he's probably someone that he's 28, 27, 28. He's probably
January 25th, 1997. I only know he has 600 games. To be clear, that's not off the top of my head. I looked it up.
Yeah.
You're the stats guy here.
But typically, the things that make stats nerds like us nervous about a long contract is guys who play a physical style. Guys who, I'll say Curtis Glencross, crash bang. His entire identity was about being tough to play against with a capital T. It fit. He was great at it, but I think it limited the longevity of his career. Chris Tanev's another guy, Troy Brower. There's a lot of guys that the contracts won't age well if they're signed for umpteen years at umpteen million, because they're Tasmanian devils. They're bowling balls. At a certain point, Mother Nature just says, okay, all your tendons are going to give in now because you played really hard. And that's why I'm never going to say a bad thing about people who play that style, because I couldn't do it and I wouldn't want to do it. But it's one of the things that makes you nervous. Hanifin doesn't really have a lot of the markers that make
great
people
skater.
Nervous.
Yeah. He's typically his movement on the ice
and he's so smart and so adaptable. And that's why he can play in so many different game situations, that he can just wrap his head around, what am I being asked to do here? Who am I playing with? Game situation, those kind of things. He can process it. He can do it. And he's very efficient at it. And those are the types of things that look at Michael Backlund. Michael Backlund's been this good since he was about 28, 29, 30. And he's been this good for 6 or 7 years, because the things that make Backlund good are between the ears. And the things that make Hanifin good, I think, are very similar.
And I think that, to bring it back to what you were saying about those Chris Fletcher trades, I think my point is that with Hanifin, because of all the reasons that you're listing, but as well, I'm not sure that the contract that he's going to get is necessarily going to be what the Flames want to be paying their third or fourth defenseman. So I actually think he's a guy who you can trade, make a smart trade, and the assets that you're going to bring in that's not one that I necessarily think you're going to be looking back at with a ton of tears.
Realistically,
you traded a good young but 600 games to his name player, defenseman, and what you're going to get back, you're going to get a nice package. That's why it's the one that excites me the most in terms of the movements that the Flames
depending on what happens with Chris Tanev, because Chris Tanev, I don't think he's a guy that's going to be paid for a long time. He's said it himself on exit day. He's done 1-year deals. He's done year-to-year deals. He's comfortable basically doing whatever. So maybe he's a guy who comes back. Maybe he doesn't. I think he's probably one of the guys that you wait until the very end and see where you are, see what kind of offers you get. But this was
my next question. I honestly, my only thing with that is, given his injury history, isn't it worth exploring possibly getting slightly more? Now, you might, if he's healthy, you might get something nice at the deadline.
Yeah.
But there's also the risk of, and through no fault of his own, because the guy's a warrior, but he has had injuries. Yeah. My only thing is you risk losing him for nothing if he does get hurt at midseason.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, because I know, when he got signed, again, he's one of the guys that, at the site, we were a little bit nervous. We showed some trepidation about the contract, because you're like 4 years, 4.5 for a guy who can hardly keep healthy. In
retrospect, great contract.
But it's one of those things where he probably paid for himself by the end of the second year. And then the last 2 years are bonus years. Okay, great. You came out ahead. So with him though, you're, depending what happens with him, your top 3 defensemen for the next while are probably Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson, Oliver Shillington, and then you need someone else to play in the top 4. And then maybe you keep some guys in on short-term deals on the third pair. Maybe you swap guys out. I think Dennis Gilbert's a really good depth defenseman. I really like the Jordan Osterley signing. They have a lot
Zadorov expressed interest in, like, Zadorov was the one guy who I was like, oh, he loves Calgary. I don't like,
well, if
in a way that surprised me, because all I'd ever heard was that he loves Miami.
If the idea
is
like
Miami and Calgary are not the same.
If you do Zadorov, if you give Zadorov good Branson money, and then Tanev either takes a pay cut or goes elsewhere, how are you feeling about it?
Decent. I mean, I've said this and I hate belaboring this point. I think I said it on Friday. Like, there's so much that for me, I just can't believe that they lost Valimaki for nothing. And then
that was a weird, that was such a weird circumstance.
It would just be
though.
So nice. Like, when I talk to people, they're like, oh, this team has no real defensive prospects in the cupboard, or not in the cupboard, in the system. And I'm like, well, they did trade away Mackey and they gave away Valimaki for nothing. And that just hurts a little bit. Like, it's one of those ones that, like, and I think we all know that the Sutter and Valimaki relationship was likely why the Flames kind of had to leave him open. But man, those are sometimes
things you can't control, though. Because I mean, think about what happens if Valimaki doesn't have a high ankle sprain in his first year that completely derails his season. What happens in his second summer if he doesn't blow out his knee and miss the entire year? Those are like, so they lost not only key developmental reps, but the clock on his waiver status, the clock on his contract basically kept ticking. So it's nobody's fault. I just think it was some bad circumstances. And then by the time, I think by the time he finally feels like he's ready, he doesn't really have the body of work to make the decision makers as confident as he is that he is.
Yeah, it's part of what I like about what Conroy said in the introductory practice conference, and you've said that you're not really expecting. Actually, you haven't said this on air, so I'm the segue.
Oh, I'll say it on air. I'm not expecting any. I'm not expecting significant PTOs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that part of tree living, and because he wanted this team to be going for it, so like that I understand. But there were always these veteran guys coming. I just wish that there had been a spot for a guy like Valimaki to develop. I don't think it was really Sutter's way. But I know that their timelines didn't match up perfectly, and as you mentioned, there were injury issues.
And hey, same kind of thing with Sam Bennett. If you knew how things would go sideways for Sam Bennett in terms of his development in Calgary, maybe you go, okay. I mean, it sucks because you started his contract rolling by playing him in those 10 games in the 15 playoffs. Maybe you do hold your nose and send him down the AHL and say, Sam, we think you're a center. We want you to go down the AHL. We want you to dominate. We'll see you at Christmas. So
then, man, my segues are all over the place and I keep jumping. Okay, if you're not expecting, and to be honest, like it sure seems I'm taking Conroy at his word here. I do not expect them to sign a couple veterans on PTOs. He has said, I believe I asked the question, how many spots are you going to leave open for these young guys? And he said it would likely be around 3.
And the math bears that out so far.
Yes. So what I don't know is who qualifies as a young guy. Like, does Walker Duehr count as a young guy?
I think so. He hasn't played a full year yet.
Okay, so him and Pelletier are 2, and
Coronado's maybe 3.
And Coronado's 3. That's your guess there.
That was my 3.
Is Ruzicka your 4th line center?
I think you want him to be. I think that's the challenge for me, because if you conceptualize it the way that the Flames, this is one of the things that makes me kind of optimistic about the season. The changes they made lowered the rotation, because all due respect to players, when you lose, they lost Trevor Lewis, great, really good intangibles player, good role player, not exactly fleet of foot. Milan Lucic was good at the things he was good at. The things he wasn't good at, he just didn't do, which was great. But I mean, it's sort of, it makes
we all like Milan Lucic.
We all like Milan Lucic, but it makes him kind of limited in terms of how you can use him. And you need to basically put him in positions to, specific situations to be succsuccessful. Same with whatever Richie
on the second line for like 40, 50 games, because I didn't see a ton
with Huberdeau on his off wing for 3 months.
Yeah.
But you remove those 3 guys, and all due respect, you remove Michael Stone, and all of a sudden, if you replace those guys all with kids, or with even just guys younger than them, your rotation gets a lot quicker. Like from the drop off in terms of speed and in terms of ability to make life difficult in very consistent systemic ways for the opposition, it increases. I think you can integrate a more consistent playing style between lines 1 through 4. If your 4th line is what? Pelche, Ruzicka, Duehr, because then you have 3 guys who can skate, 3 guys who have scored at lower levels, and then you're not really giving the other team a lot.
I want Peltier higher up the lineup. I just don't see.
That's the challenge for
I
me.
don't see where it fits, right?
Well, because I'm on the site, I'm going to basically break down a bunch of different types of line configurations they can go with. But like your wingers right now are basically what? Huberdeau, Coleman, Mangiapane, Dubé, Sharangovich, Dewar, Pelche, Coronado.
Yeah.
And then you have the 4 centers. So you can basically mix and match. I think, the nice thing is Dubé can play both sides. So can Sharangovich, so can Mangiapane, so can Coleman. You have a bunch of those guys who can do a lot of different things. And so then it's a question of, what centers they match up with. Well, it depends how Ryan Huska wants, what function does he want each line to have? I think easily the best fourth line the Flames have had since I've been covering the team was that 18-19 team where they had Mangiapane, Derek Ryan, and Garnet Hathaway, because you had 2 guys that could skate like the Dickens, a really smart center who could distribute the puck and win faceoffs, and then you had a wrecking ball with a lot of upside in Garnet Hathaway who could do a lot of different things. And I think I was asked this in the Monday mailbag on the site. Hey, do we think that Walker Duehr is more Josh Juris, all due respect to Josh Juris, who's I think in Switzerland now, or more Garnet Hathaway? So far, I see a bit more Hathaway just in terms of the things that make Duehr effective at the NHL level. And so
I'm quietly obsessed with Walker Duehr. I actually think he's got the potential to be so much better. Is this okay? This is the Daily Faceoff.
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah, like I honestly think Walker Duehr showed me so much. But okay, looking at this, and we're gonna get back to the fourth line. But do you give, assuming Lindholm is on the lineup? Is in line. Do you try to pair him with Huberdeau again and see if they can develop the chemistry that they did not have last year?
I think you have to, right?
Do you?
Yeah, because you at the very least you want to know you can go to it. I think probably you sit down with both guys. I think if I'm the coach and the GM, first time once everyone's in town, go down, have a good meal together, say, okay guys, here's what we're thinking. Are you on board? And then see how they feel, have a good conversation about where they're both at, and go, okay, we're gonna try you guys together for half of preseason, and then after the 3rd, 4th preseason game, we'll sit down, see how we're feeling about it, and then we'll go from there. But I think it's one of those things that could be really good because on paper, it didn't work last year. I think because a lot of things did not work last year. No one was really 100% where they wanted themselves to be last year. I think in a lot of different fields on the team.
Okay,
heck, their best defenseman got hit by a truck.
That was terrifying, and I don't think we realized how terrifying it was at the time. But my thing was just that it was oddly outspoken. Like again, I generally cover the CFL, so I'm used to athletes who talk about stuff when it goes wrong. Hockey, they don't, and the fact that we all knew that Lindholm and Huberdeau were not enjoying playing together very much. Nothing personal as far as I know, but just like their styles were not meshing.
Yeah. And especially
makes me question it.
Especially just the idea though, if every professional athlete gets to this point because they're very proud and very talented and very, I think, self-critical. I think that's what makes them, so good when they're on and so frustrated when they're not. But I think Elias Lindholm, especially coming off a season where he lost his 2 trigger men, he lost both of his wingers. He's probably thinking, oh God, it's all on me now. And I think he was probably self-conscious about what he needed to do to be effective. And if you're him, if you're thinking the fate of this team rests on my shoulders, do you have a lot of patience for a new winger, even if he's a guy with, however many 100 games he has, trying to figure out your system? I think if you're thinking, oh, this is the left side of the top line is not a place to be learning how to play Daryl Sutter hockey at this point. And so the guys he had success with were Dubé and Toffoli for the most part, the guys who knew the system. And
fair. That's a valid point. I mean, Ruzicka weirdly had success there not weirdly, but had success there for a little while.
A guy that came up through the same system, a guy who he'd been in camp, he'd been in training camp with, he'd seen a lot of Daryl Sutter Flames hockey. Mm-hmm. And I think he figured it out. He could just see it. And I think the nice thing was he came up through a Flames farm system that, under 3 different coaches, they've all played variations of the same kind of scheme. So even if you didn't really fully grasp the intricacies of Daryl's system, and I think a lot of guys struggle with that at times, even if you're Ruzicka, who's a rookie, you can just come in and be like, okay, I can figure this out as I go. I know about 80% of this. I can figure out the other 20% as I go. And I think Ruzicka, when he was at his playing his best hockey over the season, I think that's when it worked for him because, he figured it out. But a lot of guys, I mean, I don't think Huberdeau, was really satisfied with this season, but I also think that's what's going to motivate him.
I don't think you think that. I think Huberdeau was very vocal.
He had no swagger.
Yeah, no swagger. Yeah. Can this team get its swagger back? Speaking on August 28th, it is a pertinent question. Do you have Sharangovich? Like, that's where, can we pull up the daily face-off again? Like, Sharangovich is a first liner? I think I want Coronado there, even though I think.
Oh, here's my question though. Coronado could fit. Mangiapane could fit. I think if everyone's on board with it, you keep Backlund and Coleman together, and then do you put Mangiapane there? Do you put Pelche there? Do you maybe move Coleman onto his left side and put Coronado on that line to get him going? Because that line's, if based on history, the Backlund Coleman duo has the puck a lot. And if you have a guy who made his name in college hockey and in the USHL, basically at every level of hockey he's played in since he was like 12, his bread and butter has been scoring goals. And if you have two guys that are really good possession guys that can get him the puck a lot, that could work. And then that frees up Mangiapane to play on the top line, or Mangiapane plays with Kadri. Like, that could do a lot of different things if you can get some chemistry going. That's why I think this is going to be, people ask me like, what can we expect from the Flames this year? I'm like, I don't know, man, because, there's so many different things that could, I think they're going to try a bunch of different stuff because I think, I think the shackles are off a bit and they go, let's do weird stuff. Let's get creative in preseason. Let's try different things. Let's try different guys you wouldn't expect. Maybe Coronado plays in preseason games at center. Maybe Dubé plays in preseason games at center. I wouldn't expect them to be regulars, but if, Adam Ruzicka was a healthy scratch for about half to a third of the season last year, I don't think he's a given that he's an NHL regular. He probably should be based on his waiver status and seniority. But if you're thinking, okay, you just don't want to give it to him. You want him to have to beat someone out for it. Maybe you have a couple concurrent battles going on with Dubé and Coronado trying to figure out, do we want to play center? Do we want to play wing? Do we want to do a little of both? Can it work with us doing both? And, especially they have some depth on the blue line now, depending on how things go. If everyone's healthy, you're probably starting off with, one, if not both, of Dennis Gilbert or Jordan Osterley, either in the press box or on the Wranglers. Maybe it rolls 11-7 for some games. Maybe you go 12. Like, I think there's a lot of different things they could do. And I'm really excited for preseason because I think they're going to try a lot of really creative things that they might not have had the gumption to try because, they tried traditional over and over and over again the last couple of years. And if traditional didn't work with the current configuration of the team, and the current configuration of the team is pretty close to what they had last year, get weird.
Yeah, it's sort of remarkably close to what they had last year, to be honest, which I am still not all the way convinced is a good thing. What does excite me is, to be honest, just the feeling that they are going to try new things, and that when the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And
here's a question for you: How late do you think Sam Honzek stays in camp?
Who in camp? That's more a question for you.
Because that's the thing I think I'm really curious about because, he's got the size. He put up real good numbers. They really like him. They love a lot of things about him, and he's already under contract.
I don't think you need to rush him, though. I think that you mentioned Sam Bennett. I think that take your time with these guys. Like, what is like? You never want to be in the mushy middle. I think the Flames are a little bit in the mushy middle right now. Don't give your players time to develop.
I think especially the guys with upside.
Yes. And he is one of them. I mean, I think that the guy who I think you want to see, like Connor Zary needs to take a step forward in the AHL at this point, and you'd like to see him knocking on the door for some NHL playing time.
He played every game last year. He stayed healthy.
Yep. And the guy has scored an absolute dirt McGirt goal in the playoffs. So he's the one who I'm more. Everyone else, just give them some time. Now, with that said, I'm shocked that Dan Vladar is still. I really thought Dustin Wolf was going to be sort of coming in at number 2 for this team this year. Do you? Well, no, we sort of know the answer at this point. If Dan Vladar's there, they're just going to keep Dustin Wolf playing games and working on his development in the AHL until they can find a spot for him. Because they don't want him sitting on the bench.
I'm under the impression that on paper is probably what they're going to go with for the season. So right now you're looking probably at Mark Strimvadar in Calgary for the NHL team, Wolf and Dansk in the AHL, and Radomski and Murphy in Rapid City. Rapid City hasn't signed a goalie yet. So I think Rapid City is sort of resigned
I
to
love having you on,
having those two
like,
guys.
I don't know. I'm trying not to swear. I don't know anything about Rapid City. What? Yeah, I don't
They're
know.
in South Dakota. They have an amazing mascot who's a minor.
I just like, if you're expecting me to get into the breaking down the lines for Rapid City, I'm not going to do it. Do you think Wolf starts 8 games in the NHL this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Here's what I think, and I'll bundle Hannafin in with it. So right now, optimism's high in 32 NHL cities, especially in Vegas because they just won. But there's 32 cities that have done their tinkering. They've made their moves for the most part. I think everyone has some moves they'd like to make, but salary cap and other factors are constraining them. But I think everyone's probably reasonably happy with going in because you've only done everything on
Calgary.
paper.
I don't think Winnipeg's made all their moves.
Oh goodness, no. But they've made moves they can make right now because they need 2 to tango. But right now, I think I have a big ugly spreadsheet in front of me. Every team basically exists like this. They exist on a spreadsheet. They exist in 2 dimensions where people go, oh, I think the team looks good because of blah, 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 blah. Once they get to training camp, then you sit down and be like, okay, who's going to show up in shape? Best shape of their lives? Who's going to show up in suboptimal shape? Who picked up weird injuries in the offseason? I mean, who's going to come in and have a bad preseason? Who's going to come in and have a preseason that makes their team go, oh, you know what? We could probably use Noah Hannafin. Make some phone calls. Or, someone's backup goalie is going to get lit up like a pinball machine throughout camp, and the Flames will start getting calls on Dan Vladar. Where if not in camp, the first month and a half of season where everyone's a little bit rusty and everyone's starting to ramp up. And, I don't think we really see the best of NHL teams until about, Thanksgiving, Canadian or American, to take your pick. But somewhere in between the Thanksgivings is where teams start figuring out what they're doing and really start clicking and start rolling. And the teams that end up winning a lot early on tend to be the teams that do better overall because of that. But I think a lot of teams are going to hit that, I think teams are going to get through October and go, case in point, there's a year where the Flames used Eddie Lack as their backup goalie. He did not last past U.S. Thanksgiving because he just wasn't exactly what they needed him to be a solid 2. And they end up calling up Dan Vladar or calling up David Riddick. And by the end of the season, Eddie, I believe, I forget what they traded him, but they ended up trading away Eddie Lack to a different team. And then he basically puttered around for a little bit. But that's the kind of thing that happens where on paper, did Eddie Lack being the Flames backup goalie make sense? Yeah, it made great sense. You could look at it and go, yeah, okay, I can see why they do that based on, they want a veteran, they want a guy who made a certain amount of money, certain amount of experience, and then it just didn't work. There's going to be a lot of sort of, for lack of a better term, Eddie Lack situations in goal, on defense, up front, throughout the league. And I think that's kind of one of the things that's going to make the next, 3 months between maybe now and U.S. Thanksgiving, maybe now and Christmas, chaos, because I think a lot of teams are going to start playing that game of, what do they got over there?
So to go back to my original, like where we started on this, when we said these 6 free agents, you actually like where you're at is, look, that you gain more leverage once the season starts. The move has been basically since the draft to hold on to these guys until the deals will get better, in your opinion?
Problems become more acute once they're in front of you. If right now, if you're thinking, I don't like our defensive depth, but we don't play games till October. If you don't like your defensive depth when you start losing games, it's a much bigger problem, because all of a sudden it's not just you sitting on the dock of your summer house in Kelowna going, we'll see how it looks in camp. Once you've actually sat down and start losing games, then all of a sudden you have, your owner, president of hockey ops, fans, your coach, players going, what are we doing, guys? And I think once you got people banging on your door telling you to solve a problem, you solve a problem because you just want to stop being bothered.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. Like I do look at the NHL right now, and I mean, for me, one of the narratives going into the season is just you have these teams, these young teams in the East who are knocking on the door, but then there's not really teams in the Eastern playoff position who are going to be who look likely to drop out.
What are you thinking? Buffalo, Detroit,
Ottawa.
Yeah, I think those are the 3 I have in terms of
like they could take a leap, but is that leap going to be enough? And I mean, like Boston, I think we all think has dropped off, but you just look at the Atlantic, which I just pulled up. you have Boston, Toronto, Tampa. Toronto and Tampa aren't going anywhere. Florida made the Cup final. Like, so you're Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit. You're trying to get one of their spots. What's available? So those are the teams where I kind of look and I'm like, man, if you're Craig Conroy, those teams get off to a good start and think that that might be sort of where you're looking at for some of these guys, right?
Yeah, teams that see where think of themselves that 14, 15 Flames group, and you go, hey guys, I mean, we got all these guys sitting here. Can we interest you in some of these things? We'll just take your third best prospect.
And those teams might be the ones where, I mean, I know that they, we've heard, particularly Buffalo and Detroit bandied around a little bit throughout the summer, but they also might be the teams that they're the opposite of what you're saying. They get onto a hot start and they become more likely to want to strengthen as opposed to a slow start, right? So I largely agree with you. I found it, I accepted that it would probably be another move at the draft, but then in retrospect, it's hard to talk about because the reality is I think Conroy is right. If you don't get the deal for these guys, hang on. But I also just don't overvalue them. You might not get about it.
And especially I know a lot of fans were bugging me, probably bugging other people too about, oh, how come the Flames didn't get more 23 picks? And I get it, but this was the draft class that, since these kids were 14 or 15, head amateur scouts have been telling their GMs, man, just don't move my 23 picks, okay? You can do whatever you want with the 22s, the 24s, whatever. Right. Hell, when Brad Treliving, when they made the Sean Monahan trade, originally, I believe Montreal, as they should have, asked, can we have your 23 first? And they got told very bluntly, no. I don't think it was a conversation. I think they went no, and then it turned into the Russian nesting doll of weird conditional trades.
Hindsight is 2020. The only guys you were going to get first rounders for were Gaudreau and Tkachuk. And in the situation where the Flames were a year to a year and a half ago, they weren't trading those guys.
I mean, they got a first rounder for Tkachuk.
Yeah, fair. I mean, when was it John Bean who said there were two deals on the table? There was the one they took, and then there was the prospect one. I think that there are people who would go back and say, oh, you should have taken the prospects. But I am the first to admit I did not think that at the time. I was very impressed with what they got. So it's like only worth.
I still think. Should fans be comfortable with the length of the contracts to give those guys? Yeah, I mean, I'm never fully comfortable with any contracts because there's always risk. I mean, there's no such thing as a sure thing. Even if you sign a guy to a 1-year deal, he could blow out his knee in summer training, and then it's a wash.
You need more from Huberdeau. That's a bad deal until you get more from Huberdeau.
Yeah, and I think
I'm not willing to backtrack on that. If Huberdeau is not better than you,
Uyghur at 625 is not only quite good business, but I think it's also the kind of deal where unless Rasmus Andersson turns into even more of an offensive juggernaut, if I'm his agent, I simply just look at that contract and say, can we have that? And then I think maybe you make some adjustments for percentage of cap raise. I mean,
Rasmus is going to get more. Did you say 625?
I think getting more than 625. That's the conversation. I think the entirety of the conversation starts with, okay, look what he got. Let's have a conversation about, impacts and stuff. But I think that's a really good framing device. And I think some of the best contract work that Brad Treliving did was sort of getting guys, getting your players signed early on to deals that sort of structured the cap structure and your contract structure for the rest of the team. They signed Mark Giordano when he became their best player, and then it became very difficult to pay anyone more than your best player.
Who is the Flames' best player? Out of curiosity, is it not Rasmus Andersson?
Based on last year's Rasmus Andersson.
And you're
maybe
you think he's getting
you can last 25 games
a year less than Jonathan Huberdeau?
I feel bad. Okay, I'll just throw this out. Uyghur, after the All-Star break, fantastic.
Yeah,
played the best. Anderson in the same period was just hit by a car. So we totally have Uyghur at his best and Anderson at his best to compare. So I want to see that. I want to see those guys compete because I think those guys are probably playing a lot together in a different really high leverage situations. But I think that the entire conversation.
Rasmus Anderson, I'm looking for a lot more than 625. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're tearing up that contract, crossing out his name and saying Rasmus Anderson, handing it in. I think that's the conversation. You take the Uyghur deal and be like, okay, what does Uyghur do? What does Anderson do? Yeah. Uyghur doing XYZ gets X dollars or X percent of the salary cap. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, about the same. I think probably a little bit more. I don't know how much a little bit more is, but that's going to be I hope Anderson succeeds to the point where it's an interesting conversation, because he's probably one of the better developmental success stories they've had. They've had a few really good ones, but I think, your top defenseman who you got with a pick you got from a prospect that didn't work out, and then was very, very harshly criticized, and honestly, probably rightfully so, for his fitness in his first main camp. And then since then, like he's in, I'll say this as someone who's not in shape. He's in outstanding shape. He looks fantastic, and good for him. I mean,
I think
he got challenged, and I don't think a lot of people would have responded as well to that challenge as he did.
I don't have the comparables in front of me. I just would suggest that, he's the most likely player to be your next captain. I understand that there's debate there, but I think he is the most likely. If there were odds, and there might be odds, I don't gamble, so I don't know.
I think
if there were odds, I think he'd have the best odds for being the captain. I think he's sort of as we said, I think he's their best player. I suspect he's gonna break the bank a little bit, and he should.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Flames, you're probably hoping he has a couple seasons between now and then. What, he's got 3 years left?
Well, if you're going for it, you need him to be a top
if he's the guy that they like, they have a lot of faith and a lot of belief in him. If he's the guy that they think he can be, they're going to very politely shell out a very big check to him and say, please stick around. Yeah. We really like you.
100%. They have to. I don't think there's any choice there. All right. We're at 154. So we're probably going to go for 7 to 10 more minutes here. That's what I will say. What else have you done? I feel like we've done a lot of Flames talk. What else have you done this summer, man? I know you're a wrestling guy. I know you like MMA.
I went to Vegas for an AEW show. I went to the AEW show here. I got married. It's been a busy summer.
You got married?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Congratulations. That's on me for not.
I've been busy, man.
Man, look at that. What a friend I am.
This is why we catch up. That's why
that's true. That's why we catch up. How good wedding?
No, it was fun.
Enjoyed it.
Cool. It was fun. No one got thrown out, and everyone seemed to have a good time. So
nice.
That was all. Everyone who showed up. Everyone said what they were supposed to say when they were supposed to say it, and no one got thrown out by security.
That's great. Yeah. Congratulations.
That was a good time.
You really caught me off guard with that one. We should probably go back to Flames. That's hilarious.
Danny's gonna go home. There's gonna be a photo of us on his mantle. He's just gonna put down face down now.
Apparently, I feel terrible for so casually being like, "What's up with this? What's up with your summer, bro?" Okay, let's Flames question. Do you think they finished ahead of Seattle?
I don't know. I think
they don't finish ahead of Vegas or Edmonton.
Probably not Vegas or Edmonton.
LA is going to be better.
I think at least on paper, the clear class of the Pacific are Vegas, Edmonton, and LA. And then there's a lot of questions. Can Seattle keep their mojo going? Can the Flames bounce back from everything that went wrong with them last year? Can the Canucks find a way to take a step? I think on paper, there's San Jose and LA, or San Jose and Anaheim at the bottom, although I don't think they're going to be quite as dirt bad as they were last year. And you have the top 3 teams that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then you have a bunch of teams that could finish in a bunch of different orders.
Vancouver's got such good players, but I don't see them being better. There's a couple guys on that team who I'm like,
they have so many good pieces. It's like having all the puzzle pieces and they just don't quite fit together the way you need them to. Mm-hmm. And then, and then it just sort of looks like kind of a hodgepodge, but they like on paper, if you can surround those guys, like imagine if you had like a magic wand and you can just disappear a handful of their constraining contracts. The problem is they have so many of them. I mean, the Flames, the expensive contracts that people don't think are going to age well, or at least the Flames quote unquote core guys, they're the guys that they're going to ride or die with. So you can go, okay, I can see why they do that. And they don't really have a lot of guys down the rotation that are making weird amounts of money. It's more or less structured the way you would. Vancouver's just kind of all over the place. And I don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah, and I mean, my feeling is that now that Brad Tree living somewhere else, we know how much he loves big contracts with guys in their 30s. So just sort of start offloading some of those guys to the Flames eventually, because Brad loves old guys who are overpaid.
Hey! All I know is Mark Giordano's making what, $800,000 or something weird like that.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's where I honestly do think that's where like Tanev just makes sense if you can get him to Toronto. He's a Toronto guy. He would fit in well. He brings a toughness that they need.
Can they afford him though? Because they just signed a big deal to a very good player.
No, they can't.
And all their money's eaten up.
Yeah,
I think they
have other big deals to sign, right? Like that's the other thing. It's not done.
I'll say this: when my gut says, this is based on no inside information whatsoever. My gut says Lindholm probably sticks around. Probably. This might not age well, but probably. The thing I'm really curious about is how the contract is built. Because if I were, I was thinking about this when I was on a morning walk the other day. This is the weird stuff I think about, how to structure NHL contracts.
Now that you're married, you just go on morning walks, eh?
Yeah, I'm like, how would I do it? I mean, you front load it. Actually the good example is the Austin Matthews deal, where Austin Matthews is making league minimum salary the first 2 years of his new deal, and he's getting like $1 billion, like 12, 14, $50 million in signing bonuses. Signing bonuses are taxed differently, but they're basically, there's no escrow in signing bonuses. You just get the money. And so it's a way of guaranteeing that instead of paying, little dribs and drabs throughout the year, you go, hi, Austin Matthews, happy July 1st. Here's a giant check. See you later. And then he goes out and spends on speedboats or whatever. If you're Elias Lindholm and he goes, okay, I'm in, you go, okay, here's what you do. First 4 years or whatever, let's assume it's an 8-year deal. First 4 or 5, however many years, you go full no move, no trade, wherever will make him happy. And you load that sucker up with signing bonuses. Because
is your implication that Elias Lindholm likes speedboats?
If I were him, I like speedboats are fun. But I think in the back end of the deal,
I get weird at the end of the shows.
In the back end of the deal, you go heavy on salary because you can buy out salary. You can't buy out signing bonuses. If the idea is that people are worried, I don't know if it's going to age well, and that's a natural thing to be worried about with any NHL contract, figure out ways to build some flexibility in. Because maybe by the end of by the time, but he's 28, the new deal will kick in when he's 30, because I think his birthday is weird. It would kick in the month before he turns 30, I think. Okay. And it would take him to like 37 or 38. Maybe you're like, what if he's bad after he turns 35? Last 3 years of the deal, all salary. Maybe you give him a more limited no trade thing, because maybe you're like, maybe you'll get tired of us. Maybe you'll want to go play in Florida, Tampa, wherever. Let's figure out a way to make this a little bit easier for everyone to deal with and. And so that's the kind of thing I think of, because I think, the number isn't the thing that I'm really concerned about. I'm as concerned as much about the structure, because there's plenty of deals that are heavy signing bonuses throughout you can't do squat with. You know why they didn't buy out Milan Lucic? You know why Milan Lucic got traded here in the first place? Because his deal was structured by the Oilers when they signed him in a way that is basically pointless to buy him out. You wouldn't gain more than like $20,000 or $100,000 buying him out. So what's the point? So if you build some flexibility into the structure of the deal, it can work for everybody. But there's going to be some give and take. That's why if you want to do that, you probably have to go heavy early on. Maybe you have to throw as many bells and whistles and no trade and no moves as you can to make them happy with signing it.
And again, when do you need his answer?
I don't know. And that's a good question. I'm thinking ideally, before the puck drops on October 10th, wouldn't you? Or October 11th. Ideally, but we don't live in an ideal world. I'm thinking, I'm thinking there's,
I make a joke about how the entire Elias Lindholm situation makes you really appreciate Chuck, but I'm just trolling.
You're not wrong though. But Ryan Huska did an interview with Rod Peterson on his YouTube show, I think last week or the week before. And one of the things that Huska mentioned is the idea of like he thinks once people get here and once the season gets going and people, the players who are sort of on expiring deals or people in the locker room that might be on the fence. He said the UFA deals, but I'm reading into it more broadly. I think, he thinks that a lot of people are going to kind of, the vibe's a bit different. If I want to be good, it'll help if they're winning. But if this is a place that players want to be, if you get here and it's a good work environment and the team is good and everyone's easy to get along with, and
Johnny Gaudreau loved playing for Daryl Sutter and still left. So there's only so much risk that I think is acceptable to take on. And I will maintain that. Like, it's great if the vibes are good, it's great if they're winning, but you need pen to paper.
Yeah.
My last question for you, and I'm gonna change the topic, but it's still on the Flames. You are more, how do I say this? You're more tuned into what's going down at City Hall than just about any of us who cover the Flames.
I just know people who tell me things.
When should we be expecting an arena announcement in the next 2 months, 3 months?
Maybe a few weeks.
Few weeks? Okay. So
I think that the big holdup, they've been doing contracts basically since before the election. They've been working on contracts, papering it, but these aren't simple deals. They're very multifaceted. the provincial piece, I think we'll hear something about very soon, because
I forget what Danielle Smith said, but she said that
it has to go through the Treasury Board, and it has to go through Cabinet. And granted, the Premier is going to say, "Hey, people who I appointed to Cabinet, do you think are we cool with spending this money?" And shocker, they'll probably all say yes. And then it'll go to the Treasury, and the Treasury Board is full of people appointed by the Premier. They will also probably say yes. And then at that point, then the province has the ability to sign contracts, committing the money and things like that. So that's a very.
So that's what we're waiting for at this point.
I believe so, yeah. Okay. But I'm led to believe we're going to be hearing something definitive very soon. I don't know what soon means. It could be a matter of weeks.
Okay.
But I don't think it'll be very long. I think we probably hear something definitive before the season, maybe before training camp.
I lied. I have one more question. How much extra time are you giving yourself to get through the construction on your way to the Dome this year? Like an extra.
I don't want to think about it.
I mean,
all I know is that area is going to be so damn cool.
It wasn't that bad last year.
Once they're done, that area is going to be so damn cool. Like they're, once they get everything,
it's amazing.
Once it's done,
good for it. I'm pro Green Line, pro everything. I'm not
God.
I'm making a joke. I'm being facetious. It's great that it's happening.
I think it'll be frustrating for a lot of people until those parking lots north of the Saddle Dome turn into a big pit that they're building something in. I think, think about how excited people were, once the BMO Center went from being like, "Oh, where'd the corral go? I love the corral," to, "Oh God, that thing looks cool." I think we're going to have that kind of shift in attitudes about the construction. To be fair though, I'm not asking anyone to love the deal. I think a deal is better than no deal, because no deal led to all kinds of weird existential questions. But there's deals in other cities I like a lot more.
We're not. I mean, I don't think that this is the proper place for us to debate how much public money should go to arenas. We both have jobs to do. But like, I am ultimately happy that we're getting an arena. That's what I will say.
And I think the two questions I got from fans outside of, is this a good deal or not, which is a matter of opinion, are, one, when is it going to be done already? Because I'm tired of hearing about it. And when is the building open? I think everyone, this has been a front of mind thing in the city since the flood. Since a back burner thing since probably when Ken King came in 2000 or 2001. Like it was something that they worked on for a while. They did a lot of legwork, but it's been sort of an existential question since 2013. It's been a friggin' decade. I think everyone is going to be very excited to spend their time and brain power on other things once this thing turns from a conceptual deal into an active construction site that we walk past and go, "Oh, we could park there." And
I'm really looking forward to just like the political groundswell of goodwill that goes towards us realizing that we need a new McMahon Stadium, which is definitely going to happen.
You and I have had this conversation in the past that I think, I have no ability to affect changes like this. I think if I were in charge, I would say, okay, Cavalry, Stamps, let's figure out what we can do together, and then let's figure out a way to make it awesome. Because I think the Cavalry,
the best thing Cavalry has going though is that they have a stadium that actually fits their fan base, right? Like,
but you're also going to
5,000 people in a 25,000.
I think that's the challenge, stadium. Though. I think that's a challenge. Like, I'm really curious how that field house turns into, because could Cavalry play some games at the field house? I'm not sure what the capacity would be.
Well, with the Dinos moving out of McMahon, like, it's just, if it's not good enough for the university team, it shouldn't be good enough for a professional football team. But we are not. Honestly, my impression is like, we can talk about how badly we need it. It's not going to do us any good in terms of actually getting it.
Well, I think we'll have future opportunities to get philosophical and nerdy about infrastructure questions.
100%. We should.
And I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do infrastructure pod with Pike and Danny. Ryan,
it's us talking about bridges for 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm pumped about that bridge. I'm pumped about them extending 17th. I'm very excited about all of it. I love public transit. Ryan, is there anything you want to throw to?
We're in the middle of our annual countdown of the top prospects of the Flames organization. I think we're at 13 today. I think it was Adar Suniev at 13, and we're going to be counting the rest of them down every weekday between now and I believe early September, at which case we'll run out of people to count down. And then coincidentally, the training camp will start at that point. Strange how we worked that out.
Unbelievable. Yeah, because there's nothing between now and the golf tournament, right? We're pretty much unless there's
Yeah,
news.
because I think the golf tournament's the 12th and 13th, and then veterans report or rookies report on the 13th, and then they go to Penticton.
Yeah.
And then I believe Huska said on Rob Peterson, veterans report for medicals on the 20th. So it is, Jesus, it's 3 weeks.
It's coming.
It's 3 weeks, and then it's gonna basically be the fire hose again.
Yeah.
Between now and sometime in the spring.
Come out to the Labor Day Classic, guys. That's what I say. We got 3 weeks before Flames take over, but lots of fun stuff happening at the stadium. The Edmonton Elks have won 2 games in a row, so lots of intrigue there. Honestly, my guest was brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. I said it right at the time, although I didn't like the way I said my guest to start. Either way, they've been around since 1946. That's 76 years. They got 3 locations: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue just off 14th Street, and Bow Ridge Road Northwest by the McDonald's at Winsport. Also, their Labor Day sale starts tomorrow, August 29th. It's one of the best sales in the city, August 29th to September 4th. And it's not just skiers and snowboards. They got lots of stuff to keep you warm and dry. Yeah, check them out for great deals. Ski Cellar Snowboard. Thank you to Udo Noodle. It's their studio. And thank you to Ryan Pike. Man, you're the best. I'm so happy we did this. Finally getting to interact professionally, you and me. It
better not be the last time.
I know. Let's do it, bud. I love it. Thank you for watching. Cheers.